Hey everybody, welcome again to another edition of Life Minutes. I'm Scott from Oak Ridge Community Church. We are continuing our series, The Search for the Real Christian Faith. Today we're going to talk about God. Most of the world's population believes in God, however that may be defined. But that does not mean that we all agree on who God is. In logic, there is a law, they call it, known as the Law of Non Contradiction. Basically, what this is that if you and I have two diametrically opposite viewpoints on a topic, let's say that you have a belief in God and I have a belief in God and we are miles apart in our belief, the Law of Non Contradiction says that we're either both wrong or one of us could be right and one wrong, but we both can't be right because what we think about God, we contradict each other. And so we both can't be right, but we might both be wrong, or maybe one of us is right. When it comes to God, we're either all wrong about who God is or someone is right. Now, regardless, we can simply choose to not believe in God, not to believe in Christ. So let me dive into this, the Christian view of God, very briefly in this video regarding his existence. The Bible does not try to prove the existence of God. In fact, it assumes it. Very first verse of the Bible, in the beginning, God created. Many who do not believe in God assume that he does not exist, and they'll go all out to prove that he does not. And when it comes to the existence of God, and what we're going to do in this video is I want to share with you 3 reasons to consider that he might exist, that he is real, that he is alive. Now, anybody watching this video, we make the decision whether we want to believe in God and subsequently to believe in Christ or not. In fact, here's an interesting thing. There are at least 20 lines of reasoning, arguments we could say, that would support God's existence. And we're only going to look at 3, right? So here we go. And these are discussions, or I hate the word arguments, but that's how we put them out there. You may have heard these before. You may have already, written them off, but I want you to consider these. First, there's what is known as the argument of cause and effect. Basically this: most people now believe the universe had a beginning. The universe is not eternal. Even those who believe in evolution, many of them will tell you, well, at some point in time, the universe began, all right? The discussion comes, well, okay, if the universe had a beginning, who started it? Where did it all begin? The idea of cause and effect is that whatever exists, right, something caused it to happen. This book did not just magically come together. This book, A Search for the Spiritual by James or Mary White, was put together by Baker Books, a publishing company. It just didn't one day, somehow, miraculously appear as a book. The effect of this book had a cause. The cause was the publishing company, right? And so for us as a Christian, I believe that the universe had a beginning, and the one who brought it all into existence was God. Now, there are people who will say, well, wait a minute, where did God come from? But here's where the problem comes. There has to be, at some point in a long chain of cause and effect, what we call the uncaused cause. In other words, there had to be someone or something that started everything, because this can't go back, quote, eternally, unless there is a person or something that is also eternal and has always been. So for the idea of cause and effect, everything that you see around you has been made by someone, something, either God or if something's man-made, whatever, but it's still there. It's the idea, the argument of cause and effect, that there was a God who brought everything into existence. Okay, that's one of the arguments. Secondly, and I want to get through this real quick, time-wise, is another argument for the existence of God is the design or the order of the universe. Just think about how everything operates. Think about the magnificence of a single cell or DNA. I find it very hard to believe that evolution created this magnificent, intricate cell and all of those, DNA and such. Just think about the complexity of our world. The earth is a precise distance from the sun. Any closer, we'd all burn up. Any further away, we'd all freeze. It spins at just the right speed, tilted just on its axis at the right angle. And so it's just the magnificence of the world in which we live, how everything is put into place. So here's what this is saying. The designs, the intricacies of our universe, of our world, cry out for an intelligence behind it, not just some random mutations that so many people try to hang on to. So one of the arguments, you can expand on this, is what's called the intelligent design argument. Finally is what we would call the moral argument. There is a sense of general morality in our world. Now, some people say, well, that's not true. But overall, yes, it is. Deep within, we know that certain things are right and wrong. Why do we cringe at the Holocaust or Stalin's genocide of 4 million Ukrainians? Well, because deep inside, we know things that are right and things that are wrong. And it's not dictated by society. Because there are societies that used to be cannibals, headhunters. You and I would say, well, that's wrong, but in that society, that was accepted. In other words, their morality would be different than ours. And so there's a general sense for most of humanity that certain things are unacceptable, that we cringe at. There is what we could say a higher authority. Romans chapter 2 talks about how even people who don't know God will respond in a moral way and show by what they're doing, a conscious decision they make or an action they do, that they actually are a moral being. And that morality comes from God, a sense of right and wrong. Now, some people will say, well, you can't make objective claims for morality, like, for example, that stealing is wrong. Because some people will tell you, no, stealing is okay, and then they'll try to explain why. But it's interesting that most people who make claims like that, they don't want to be stolen from. And you steal from them, they're not going to be happy. There's an inconsistency in a person who says you can't say that there's a moral, objective, guide somewhere in the universe. And so they'll tell you something like we just said, that we can't say stealing is wrong, but they don't want to be stolen from. What does that mean? That means that in their minds, morally, they think stealing is wrong. Here's the deal. There are a lot of ways to approach this whole idea of whether God exists. These are just barely scratching the surface. I would encourage you that if you have questions about the existence of God, dive into this. Go further and discover what you can about the fact that God exists. And in the next video, we'll talk about, if he does exist, what's he like? Thanks for joining me.